Good morning and welcome to Two Marines in Kiev. I'm not sitting here and we're working remotely, but Andy Milburn sitting in the headquarters of the Mozart Group, former MARSOC commander, and JSOC Saksent, deputy commander, experienced freedom fighter fighting ISIS and now in Ukraine.
And Andy Bain, the CEO of the Ukraine Freedom Fund, which he founded in 2014, at first signs of Russian aggression, and has lived here in Ukraine for some 31 years, but more importantly, is also a retired Marine colonel too. Great pleasure to see you, Andy, even though it's remotely. Yeah. I hope your household goods are moving safely.
I've got an army of movers coming in about 30 minutes, but after May 9th, I felt it was safe to come back and move my family so that I can return to Kiev in 3 weeks and until the end of the war. I've told the family I'm not coming home until victory. So,
yeah, the May the 9th, which turned out to be a little bit like the the millennial, right? Everyone predicted bad things were going to happen, and so far, thank goodness, nothing has. Yeah. Although, as we were talking about before the show, the Russians are definitely making progress, both in the east and the southeast. Steady progress. The worst has not happened. The Ukrainian army has not been enveloped by Russian forces, but nevertheless, the fact that they are gaining ground is concerning, and it's at a time too. I mean, we're almost 90 days into the war, right? It's a time when we are 90 days into the war. It's a time when, for most in the West, the news cycle has moved on. They've kind of got Ukraine fatigue, and which is just it's a natural kind of public focus of effort. I would argue, I don't know how you feel about this, Andy. I would argue that this is a critical point in the war, though. I mean, this is a time when the attrition of the last 90 days is. It's not something that you can simply dismiss, and Ukrainians are having to hurriedly train guys, and there's no shortage of volunteers, but they're having to hurriedly train them and send them to the front. And you're familiar with the dynamic here that a lot of territorial defense guys who would otherwise be just located around Kiev are now also being sent to the east. So definitely, I'm not being chicken little here, but we're not out of the woods yet here in Ukraine.
I mean, I think it's interesting if someone, and I hope someone in European command has this, but I don't, but it's a dynamic in terms of how much manpower Ukraine has. And I think they've got a lot of manpower and a lot of volunteers. But like you said, they're going to the front with 1 or 2 days training. Often that's more than they get, which is, so they're taking a lot of casualties unnecessarily. And I suspect after the war, there are going to be some investigations as to who screwed that one up. But also, but the Russians are in the same boat because, you read about the retired general they brought out of, to be a pilot. And then the T-60, they're bringing T-62s back from the Korean War whenever they had T-62s. So it doesn't seem like the Russians are doing so well. So it's really getting down to it.
Yeah, I hope you're right on that. Of course, another aspect of this, though, that does cause concern is the fact that the Russians have repositioned forces, have withdrawn some forces from Syria. And, this is probably just anecdotal, but nevertheless, we've heard it repeatedly that the guys who are now manning Russian units on the front line are better in quality and training than they were at the beginning of the war. I know that's a very low bar. I'm not saying that they are, extremely proficient, but they're at least a little more experienced.
Well, there's a lot of discussion that the units, especially around Kiev, were both low quality, but also some of them were specifically designated and recruited for psychopaths. The guys in Irpin and Bucha.
No kidding.
Yeah, no, there were. I talked to several Ukrainians who had. One from Irpin, he's a retired Navy captain whose house had been completely ransacked, the NATO things destroyed, and booby trapped. So they had to send EOD into his house before he went back in there. But he was saying how they had found that prevalence for social dysfunction amongst the people in those units was very high, as if they'd been recruited out of prisons or something like that. Clearly, I don't think the Russian people are so supportive of war crimes like that anyone would do it. So it might take a special unit to do something like that.
Yeah. I'd heard a version of that story too, that Putin's much vaunted reforms in the aftermath of Georgia were really a paper tiger, because so much of that money allocated to reforming the army, it was dissipated through corruption, and that the army always had has had a very low image in among the Russian population, and so those who could afford to or could get some kind of deferment did so, and so in the end, it was kind of the dregs that ended up in the army. I mean, it's
certainly in the enlisted ranks, like in the Soviet times. But to be an enlisted man was something you really did. It's almost like being a slave. You were a slave for 2 years, and you got the hell beat out of you for the first 6 months, and then you turned around and beat the hell out of the next cadre that came in. But then stories of Russian soldiers who'd never seen paved roads before, or who didn't know what a flat screen TV was. They're clearly recruiting a lot of these guys from areas of Russia that are not the most civilized, also so that when they get killed, no one's really talking about it. You don't want to take kids off the Red Square whose parents are connected and have them die. You want to take people who no one cares about or is going to talk about, particularly in a closed society.
Yeah, that's a very interesting comment, actually. We've got one of our new interpreters, Yuri, who's Ukrainian American. He spent 4 years in the Soviet army in Moscow, and this was during Afghanistan. And I said, hey, you're lucky you weren't sent to Afghanistan. He's like, hey, the units around Moscow were recruited from Muscovites, and they didn't go places like that. They had too much. They were the I suppose the children, perhaps not necessarily of the affluent, but of the, as you point out, those who had the greatest influence immediately around the capital. So.
Well, it's just, I meant to send this to you, but one of the media companies in Ukraine that I own, but they did a report on 100 slides of what the Russian impression is of the war, and Putin's favorability has gone up. People's, across the board, the war is not having negative impact in Russian culture that they like to tout about the West, and the economic sanctions may be starting to bite, but not in any way that is having negative impact. At least the way people are responding to, they might think differently, but they're not responding that way. But interestingly, also, it seems there are more Russian refugees from the war than there are Ukrainian. Over 4 million Russians have left Russia since the beginning of the year.
No kidding.
And it's all, the upper middle class people who know what's going on and realize this is not a good thing. But the massive exodus of Russians is quite phenomenal.
Voting with their feet.
Yeah, exactly.
But as you point out, as a percentage of the total population, that's a lot. But nevertheless, we seem to grasp onto small glimmers of hope that the Russians are against the war, like that recent concert in Moscow where they showed the crowd chanting "fuck the war" or whatever. But those seem to be kind of the anomaly, right?
Well, during the Iraq War, you had Cindy Sheehan and all those people who they got a lot of news time, but they really didn't have much impact at the end of the day. And it just plays to the Western soundbite as opposed to the reality of what's happening in Russia.
And it's really not being brought home to them. I mean, as the news coverage here shows Russian bodies being recovered by Ukrainians and stacked in refrigerated cars outside Kiev, so there's definitely a deliberate policy not to bring all of these, all the KIA, those killed in action back to home where, it might provide a spectacle that the media would latch onto.
But if you look at the casualties for Russia are high relative to Afghanistan or relative to the last 50 years of war. But they've been conditioning the Russians with, if you look at Russian media, the war films, Russian war films the last 20 years are actually, production quality extremely good. They get real T-34s and Tiger tanks And I mean, if you speak Russian, they're really pretty interesting movies, and they always have a little tinge of patriotism, enough to justify the outlandish production costs that are thrown behind them. But it's been this massive long-term propaganda campaign. And so people are used to seeing casualties there, and the casualties we're seeing now are nothing compared to 1941, when the Germans surrounded a Russian army and then killed 3 million people, or captured them and then let them starve to death.
But as a percentage of the army that came into the Ukraine, you're right, staggering. I mean, even at the most conservative estimates of, the like 16, 17,000 killed, are the most conservative estimates. It's extraordinary. So switching gears back to the Ukrainian military, and bear in mind I'm just seeing one tiny snapshot here, but our familiarity with Ukraine SOF is perhaps kind of an indicator of how things are going. I mean, our perception, our experiences with Ukraine SOF, the demand to train brand new units, and not just Ukraine SOF, because someone heard we had Marines here. They asked us to take a look today at the Marine replacements for Mariupol, right? The Marine Brigade. They're forming 5 or 6, what they're calling Marine assault companies. And we've got 3 of our guys out there now doing an assessment of these guys who, by all accounts, are brand new. We continue to train the Azov down near Zaporizhia, and those guys are 2 battalions that have been raised to replace their casualties in Mariupol. And again, those guys are very green indeed. Obviously very brave, great cohesion. They're very upbeat. But brand new. I mean, we had one of them shot himself in the foot the other day on the range, first day on the range. And of course, our guys were all like, oh my God. We had a medic, Dathan, who was treating him, and this guy's buddies came up and said, don't worry. He's done this before. So I guess it was the other foot. I don't know. But it is a little concerning. And then today, and we had just almost seemed like succession of people coming in or calling, saying, "Hey, can you do this?" From everything from the DIA reconnaissance battalion through to the those battalions that have the UW mission. We'd love to get more Green Berets in to help with that. So it's a capacity issue for us. We can handle a battalion with 6 guys if we do company by company, which is extraordinary. And that's because we have these Swiss Army knives of people who can do multiple things. But that really is kind of stretching it. And so at any given time, I said at a stretch, we can do 2 to 3 battalions, but it really comes down to prioritization. It comes down to resources, and all of our guys.
So a lot of it is, I assume for you, a lot of it is money. You could scale up with more funding.
Yeah.
The low donors, the Ukraine Freedom Fund, we're buying good equipment, but what I think you're doing is, teaching people how to survive artillery fire and then how to treat each other when they get wounded is the thing that's going to save the most lives. And more safe lives on the front line is going to mean a stronger defense and counteroffensive. So that's really the best allocation of resources.
Yeah, you're right, Andy. And it amazes me that there do not seem to be resources allocated to that. So here we are, still relying on donor funds. To your point, though, people ask me, what would you do if you had, say, donations amounting to $200,000 a month or whatever? What we do is increase our capacity. I mean, we would be training, a brigade at a time or more. We could reach out and train other units beyond Ukraine SOF. So I think, the donations have an exponential effect. We don't, as spend money on equipment. It all goes to just kind of supporting the trainers and things. I mean, basically something to live on.
I think my guess is, back of the envelope, you guys could train a battalion for about $20,000, full in to at least a basic standard. Whereas like a Marine recruit battalion, what does it cost to send a Marine through recruit? Like $60,000 each. So
per recruit. Yeah.
So
it's definitely,
you're talking $6 million versus $20,000.
Yeah. And also, Andy, you know, I mean, and this, you know, this isn't propaganda. I mean, look at the quality of our trainers. You know, I mean, today, you know, doing the assessment of this marine assault company, the three guys, two of them are instructors for Estonian SWAT, you know, in Tallinn. And I mean, top-notch guys. They instruct sniping, they instruct explosives, and you know, what we call TCCC. And then the third guy was in Dev Group, otherwise known as SEAL Team 6 to the public. Very humble guy, former Marine too, with multiple skills. And so you're getting three guys. I mean, you just can't, they don't come much better than that. And these guys are, you know, going today to do an assessment for peanuts, right?
Well, that kind of gets to what we were talking about before the show, and how Ukraine's kind of slipped off the map in terms of you know, the press coverage, and you know, the New York Times had an editorial about, well, maybe Ukraine should settle, and Henry Kissinger displaying his senility, you know, mentioning the same thing. And I sit there and go, how, as an American, can you tell another country, well, what, you know, don't put your freedom in front of, you know, don't let your freedom inconvenience me.
Yeah. And it shows just an incomprehensible misconception of Putin, right? The fact that, hey, you know, let's just hold the status quo now, guys, and, you know, just settle down, as though it's just going to stay that way.
Yeah. I mean, you got to take care of him now when he's weak. I mean, he's not that he's going to get that much stronger left to his devices, but, you know, clearly he's on the back foot, you know, tactically. And I think being able to swat a good defeat against them would be, you know, and then create, you know, make Russia like North Korea. Leave them to their own devices and let them wallow in their, you know, back.
I'm pessimistic about international resolve to do that, though. You know, I think we saw great momentum in the immediate aftermath of the invasion, but you know how international outrage dies away pretty quickly, and basic economics starts to.
People go back to being people. I mean, at the beginning of the war in Ukraine, it was, you know, everyone stopped drinking. I mean, martial law, no one drank, everyone volunteered, everyone was ready for everything. And it's like, wait, Kiev is like a normal city now. It's unbelievable. Just in the last, you know, everything has opened up, and yet, you know, I mean, this just yesterday down in Zaporizhia, two missiles landed, you know, within a kilometer or two of the hotel where our team is. So, you know, there's definitely a disparity between the capital here. And then, you know, I mean, there's goodness in that, but definitely a disparity here and what is happening in the East. Yeah, Kharkov is apparently better. My cousin came out, and my cousin Chris, he's out in Kharkov, and he wrote me yesterday saying he's quitting his job in Palo Alto. He's moving to East Ukraine to help out.
Really? Wow.
So obviously he doesn't feel under any threat in Kharkiv, and he really enjoys. He's really impressed with the people and the lifestyle.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I can certainly understand that. There's the nearer you get to the front, I suppose the more that resilience is very clearly visible. And when the front was here in Kiev, it was the same way, right? Because you remember there was only I don't know what the percentage of the population remained behind, but it definitely wasn't most of the population, right?
Oh, I would have said under 20%.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a different city, but there was kind of a sense of, hey, we'll stick this out, and whatever comes, we're not moving.
But it's a danger. The last 8 years, you know, after Maidan, but most of the war was in the East. A lot of Ukrainians slipped into sort of the way it was in the States and Iraq is, well, there's a certain class who fight the war, and then everyone else goes about their business. And it was not as bad in Ukraine because a lot of people had closer ties to the fighting than in the U.S., where I had college classmates who I was the only guy they never knew who knew what the military was. You know, it's kind of scary, but there's a danger that Ukraine, Kiev and Lviv and the Western cities might slip back into, well, this is the new norm, as opposed to having to kick the Russians out of Ukraine, which I think they need to do this summer.
Yeah, which we're working collectively to make happen. Hey, there's some good news stories, Andy. The IFAKs, the individual first aid kits, do seem to be making it to the front line in much greater quantity. The guys that we're dealing with have them, and I do want to talk about very quickly, the training package. We've got this 5-day standard training package. But we also now, because we have this team of ultra competent Slovakian medics who have worked in Syria and Iraq and now come out here and support us. And they ran a superb 2-day course for all the medics in the battalion, down in Zaporizhzhia. And then when we ran our 5-day course, those medics, when we got to the second day, which is TCCC, those medics were kind of the assistant instructors, so it helped bolster their image. It was really quite something. So, I think I would stack this training package. I would gladly give it to a U.S. Marine battalion, and I think they would greatly benefit from it. Last night they issued squad leaders, or rather the platoon commanders, an order, and sent them out on a night ambush. These guys come a long way. They come a long way in 5 days.
Was it a live fire night?
Marksmanship, we were actually, because we were always taught, hey, if you don't tell if you have no means of scoring your round, it's a wasted round, right? Blasting away at paper targets. And, just having one guy after the other come and shoot without anyone checking where they're shooting is a total waste of time. Apparently, we're told that is kind of the norm here. So for our 2 days of marksmanship training, they only get a limited number of rounds, 120 rounds, but every one is either a hit or a miss, and it gets recorded, and the guys who don't do so well have to remediate. So again, this is nothing revolutionary. I'm just saying that it's a quality course, and the guys are doing a superb job.
Well, it is. I'd be really interested after the war to figure out the personnel structure and how so many people are not trained. And why there seems to be a sense of urgency beyond planning in terms of getting, let's pick Igor out off the street, and 3 days later he's on the front lines in Zaporizhzhia.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not anecdote. That isn't an exaggeration. We've come across that time and time again.
But it goes to the same with the ammunition, and that why all the NLAWs and javelins. They're getting to the front, but not in the numbers that they're coming over the Polish.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. And often without, if these battalions are anything to go by, they've got a shortage of batteries, all those problems. Very few of them now. I know the NLAW and the Javelin have got a huge amount of publicity, but actually it's really hard to find someone who's fired them in combat. Because they've just had the NLAW's been particularly effective because it's very simple and it doesn't require a lot of care and feeding. So I shouldn't diminish that.
Well, so I was asked by some of the Intel guys to go take a look at these drones that the company's manufacturing out of Chernivtsi. Great young scientists doing great stuff. We're going to support them. They're excellent for withdrawing evacuations and finding out where not to go. Really humanitarian capabilities that these drones have. But as I went to they showed me in the back of a Sprinter van they had going on the way between Chernivtsi and Kharkiv, and they opened the back to show me. I saw the drone there, and they put it together for me. But also in the back of the van were 4 Stinger missiles. I was like,
wow,
so this is where the Stingers are. And,
the elusive Stingers.
Yeah.
We get asked a lot for Javelin trainers, so we're putting out the word for that. And I do before we draw to a close here, want to remind everyone that the Russians have littered this country with cluster munitions, and so we're hungry for to get EOD techs out here, not to defuse stuff, but to train Ukrainian bomb techs. The Ukrainians severely lack capacity, both in terms of training, personnel, and equipment. And so that's something that we are pushing hard.
Ukraine's really going to be ground zero for bomb clearing in the next 10 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they've started in Irpin and Bucha already. And they have had some near casualties from the, where they blow up the demolition blows. Yeah, because they're stacking, about 2,000 pounds of explosives. There's so much of it.
Well, it's when you and I went up there and all the soldiers, the soldiers were jumping down on the tanks.
Kicking on the ground. I know. I've got a video with that noise in the background. It still makes me cringe.
Well, we're almost out of time here, Andy. I want to, plug what you're doing and tell our listeners to look at themozartgroup.com for a place to, Freedom Fund. Obviously I'm a big fan of the Freedom Fund, but I think right now, anything we can do to get soldiers trained, so they're going to the front and doing it credibly and surviving and able to take the fight to the enemy rather than just become casualties is got to have a critical priority. So
yeah, please go to our website, guys, and click either join or donate, even if it's a small amount, to use that overused but true cliche. Every bit does count.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good to talk to you, Andy, and I'll probably talk to you very soon.
Okay. Yes, indeed. All right, Andy.
Okay.
Hey, thanks much.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.